Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Cases. I'm Shant Kerbabian. The state of human rights in Qatar remains a concern for several non-governmental organizations. Although there have been several noted improvements, but still the particular situation of migrant workers in the country remains troubling. Now, the construction boom in advance of Qatar hosting the 2022 FIFA World Cup has reportedly led to an increase in human rights abuses. In 2013, Amnesty International published reports showing that unpaid migrant workers were left to go hungry. Now, according to the report, workers are being treated like cattle. According to another report by The Guardian, based on documents obtained by the Nepalese embassy in Qatar, dozens of Nepalese migrant laborers had died in Qatar in just a few weeks around in September 2013, and thousands or more were enduring appalling labor abuses. Now, according to their analysis, current construction practices will have resulted in over 4,000 deaths by the time of 2022 event. As of December 2013, FIFA has investigated but taken no action to force Qatar to improve worker conditions. Now, what are the conditions of migrant workers and what conditions they have to endure in Qatar? Are those workers being exploited in the country? And what is the role of different companies and contraction firms in the mistreatment of migrant workers in Qatar? With us to discuss these questions and the notion of human rights and business and more is in the studio Ms. Rania Fazah, the regional representative and researcher for Middle East and the Gulf Business and Human Rights Resource Center. And also joining us via satellite from Beirut is Dr. Hussein Gharbieh, Professor of Political Science at the Lebanese University. Welcome. I would like to welcome my guests.
Hello.
Now, before we get to our discussion, we have a report. Let's check it out.
The level of abuse and exploitation of migrant workers is high in Qatar, the country of which 88% of its residents are migrant workers. The country has pledged to organize and run the FIFA World Cup in 2022, so authorities as well as local and international companies are now more than ever counting on workers, mainly from the Far East, to engage in construction works of the country. In this context, migrant workers' contracts often differ significantly from what they were promised when they were recruited in their home countries. Moreover, many migrant workers in Doha are housed in cramped living quarters, with the temperature reaching more than 40 degrees in the summer. The Guardian issued a report saying that Nepalese migrant workers have been dying at a rate of one a day in construction works to prepare for the 2022 World Cup in Qatar, the richest nation in the world.
मलाई धेरै दुःख लागिरहेछ मेरो छोरो यहाँ घरमा हत्तापत्ता भएको मान्छे केही पनि एक शब्द पनि नखोकेर घरमा त्यति राम्रो छोरो मैले विदेशमा पठाएको एक्कासी गरे के कारणले भयो हावापानीले हो कि अनि कुनै अरु केही हो कि भन्ने मलाई त्यो दुःख लागिरहेछ मैले चिन्ता रात दिन लिइरहेको छु.
And what makes the situation worse is that migrant workers have had pay withheld and passports confiscated to prevent them from fleeing the abusive and dangerous workplace conditions, The Guardian added. Accordingly, François Crépeau, the UN Special Rapporteur on the human rights of migrants, said on November 2013 that laws concerning laborers in Qatar still lack implementation on the ground. Because of the kafala system, the migrant worker remains legally bound to the sponsor's mercy during the contract period.
र 3 महिनादेखिको 6 महिना 7 महिना 8 महिना सम्मको पैसा छैन. अब मैले त भनिहाले अगाडि नै आफ्नो व्यक्तिगत भन्नुपर्दा 10 महिनाको स्यालेरी पाइन. 17 महिना भयो आईडी छैन. लिगली तरिकाले आको तर इलिगली भयो हैन.
In this regard, international human rights organizations noted the sponsorship system as the modern-day slavery because of the exploitation of migrant workers by their sponsors under the pretext of protection. Nevertheless, how many more must die for Qatar's World Cup? And how can the rights of the migrant workers be protected?
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. And Ms. Rania, I would like to welcome you again to our show, and thank you for being in Cases. Ms. Rania, before we get into the topic, I mean, I would like to personally focus that this is by no way an attack on authorities of Qatar or anything. But these human rights violations are very troubling. And I think like we would be all proud of Qatar as host, the first Arab host of the World Cup, but with a clean human rights record, we hope. Now, before we go to that topic, before we focus there, let's lay the ground. Let's talk about the notion, the idea of business and human rights. Can you give us an overview? Can you give us an idea of this notion, and does it even exist in the business sector?
Yeah, actually, business and human rights do exist. The whole thing started with someone called John Ruggie, who was the special representative for human rights and business, who started research commissioned by the UN. And he found out that there are a lot of relations between business sector and business work in the world and human rights. Actually, and in his report, he detailed kind of 18 different human rights that are impacted in a way or another by businesses. So it's not only actually migrant workers, and it's not only labor rights. You have a lot of other rights, political civil rights, right to association, privacy, freedom, even safety and health issues, torture, right to be protected, from torture as well. So if we talk about private security companies, if we talk about privacy of people in general, so tapping on phone conversations or tracking internet surfing modes of people, all this is related to privacy and not necessarily those of the workers.
All these rights and all these things you mentioned, unfortunately, we're seeing violations of all these rights.
Exactly.
In every sector. And it's not only Qatar, it's not only the Arab world, it's in the world.
It's the world, exactly. This is actually what I want to also emphasize. Business violation of human rights is not something that is in the Middle East. It is something that we see all over the world. I think everyone would remember the Rana factory last year, and this is not in the Middle East. We have other apparel factories in parts of the Middle East that do have similar violations, but also you have a lot of other violations worldwide. And I would like also to highlight that there are a lot of violations by multinational companies working outside their countries or home countries. And these actually benefit, in a sense, from poor law enforcement in hosting countries, a bit of the tendency to attract investment, foreign investment, so the states would be more or less reluctant to hold the multinationals accountable for violations of human rights in general. So you have different facades of the problem. So it's not one issue. It's a whole bunch of things. And getting back a bit to the UN, the UN has the UN guiding principles on business and human rights, which are actually, a lot of people say they are not binding. They are not a binding instrument, yes, but they are there, and they set clear guidelines on how the business sector should actually work.
Are they effective?
Well, this is why what I'm actually saying, that they are not binding. So you cannot legally bind any state or any business sector. But of course, the framework which talks about protect, respect, and remedy, practically the obligation of the state to protect human rights.
Let's focus on this: the protect, respect and remedy.
Yeah.
Like the protection is...
it is the duty of the state to protect citizens or everyone in the country, in the vicinity of every state, whether citizen or not, to protect the people from human rights violations. Respect is the duty, and here I'm saying duty, and which means an obligation in a sense, the duty of companies to actually respect human rights and to take the measures to observe that there are no violations on their premises and even in the supply chain of their work. And the remedy, which is access to remedy, so people who are suffering from any abuses from these companies has the right, but not only the right, the access, the proper access to be able to access justice and to get remedy, whether judicial or non-judicial remedies. So both, this three-pillar framework actually is important for the protection. Now you tell me, is it binding? Is it legally binding? I say no, but the more we tell people to go and to actually speak out and say that there are certain violations, the more we seek justice and remedy, I think the more the situation will get better, especially in this part of the world, in the Middle East and North Africa and the Gulf.
Okay, now allow me now to go to my guest in Beirut, Dr. Hussein Gharbieh. Dr. Hussein, thank you again for being in Cases.
You're welcome.
Dr. Hussein, we were talking about the main pillars of the framework that for a business that is binding according to human rights, and one of the main pillars is protection. Do you think that the Qatari, since we're talking about a Qatar report, Amnesty report about Qatar, do you think the Qatari government is protecting workers in general and specifically migrant workers in Qatar?
Well, the thing is, if you want to discuss this issue in particular, you cannot just talk about the current situation in Qatar regarding the business it's being undergoing because of the World Cup preparation 2022. It's in fact deeper than in the societies of the Gulf states. Yes, the general feeling of the people there is to look down at foreign workers, particularly those who come from poor area in Asia, like Pakistan, India, Sri Lanka, Bengal, all these poor countries. Simply because they have corrupt governments in first place, and they know very well, the Gulf states, that they cannot be, they are sort of untouchable, and the authorities of these countries cannot go or cannot do or wouldn't do anything to protect their own citizens in the Gulf states. So in fact, the Qatari case represents the general feelings of the people in the Gulf states toward these poor people who comes from poor countries in Asia. They're sort of isolated. They go there to earn a living, but they look down at them by the national people of these Gulf states, and they cannot be protected by anyone but by the law of these countries. In these countries, the law always with the authorities or with the people, the national people of these countries, against the foreigners in general, particularly those, as I said, in Asia. But they wouldn't do the same. They wouldn't have the same treatment to people who come from Europe, for instance, or from America. They are well treated, unlike those who come from poor countries in Asia.
But Doctor, don't you think right now there is a pressure on Qatar? There is a huge pressure on Qatar, especially that Qatar now is under the spotlight because it will be hosting this worldwide event. And don't you think this might be a push towards implementation of monitoring its human rights record more and implementing actually the certain laws and in the country?
Well, it's really ironic. I mean, it shouldn't come to this stage in the case of workers in Qatar. Now it's been going for a few years, the preparation for the infrastructure of the World Cup. Still, we don't see proper action towards protecting these workers, not from their own governments, not from the international community. I think Qatar wants to build a glory at the expense of these poor people. Like if we go back to the ancient civilizations, like the pyramids, who they were built by poor people and to glorify the rulers of the country. Exactly happening the same thing now in Qatar. They want to have this glory to accomplish the infrastructure to host the World Cup, but at what expense? At the expense of these poor people. These people cannot even speak out properly. They fear the reprisal from the authorities. They are in fact suffocated by threats to their lives or to their well-being. So they are sort of they become hopeless, and they do not know where to turn to in order to protect themselves against the authorities. Even some workers, they said, we want just to leave the country. We don't want anything. Just give us our passport to leave. So it's so complicated to them. and they are sort of left alone with no help. The international community is not doing, in fact, enough to protect these people, to get their rights from the authorities, and I don't know. Yeah,
Doctor, at this point, what could the international community do? I mean, if you're saying that the laws in Qatar are allowing the companies and government to do this and to exploit the workers in this way, what could the international community do?
First of all, the authorities of the countries where these workers come from, they should act in the first place. They should exert pressure on the Qatari government. They should raise the case to the international community, even the international court, in order to protect their own citizens working abroad. On the other hand, the international community should threaten Qatar if you do not, for instance, do what should be done to these workers. We might rethink of hosting or allowing you to host the World Cup 2022. So there are so many kinds of pressure you can exert on the Qatari government in order to improve the living situation and to pay what's due to the workers.
Okay. Now, allow me now, Dr. Hassan and Ms. Reem, to go to a short break. And after the break, we are going to view a small report about a story of a Nepalese worker and workers in general and their conditions in Qatar. Stay tuned.
Evening. Women's rights redefined.
The crisis of capitalism, the European impasse, the energy shortages, the emerging power of Asia, the economic power of the Arab world, the economic debate, informative, revealing, and progressive. It discusses the economic event of the world.
Economic debate, where the numbers reveal the truth.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Now, before we commence with our talk, we have a report, which is the story of a Nepalese worker, and he shares it about the working conditions in Qatar, and this was done by the Guardian and shared on their website. Let's take a look.
त्यही हो अब मेहनत गरेर पनि अब त्यहाँ जस्तो राम्रो श्रम आइपुग्दैन हैन दुई चार पैसा कमाओस् भन्ने सोचले नै गएको हो त्यसकै लागि अब पैसा जसले पनि बाँच्नको लागि चाहिहाल्छ लाइफमा मुख्य समस्या त सबभन्दा पहिला कुरा बस्ने कुरा थिएन बस्नकै लागि कोठामा अब चाहिने सामग्रीहरू थिएन बेडसिटहरू थिएन पानीको पनि समस्या हुन्थ्यो अब क्याम्पमा अब ड्युटीबाट आसिन हुनु पर्यो हैन अब भनौं न मेसिनहरू जस्तो कि एसीहरू बिग्रिएको छ भने अब बनाइदिन्थेन हाम्रोमा किचनमा कस्तो थियो भन्दाखेरि तपाईको केही सामान थिएन मतलब सामान थिएन भन्दाखेरि अब काट्ने कुराहरू अब हुन्छ नि एउटा मतलब साफ गर्ने पानी पनि त्यति आउँथेन हैन अब फ्रिज दिएकै थिएन अब खाना हामीले बनाएपछि बिग्रिन्थ्यो त्यो हाम्रो क्याम्पमा आउँदाखेरि तिमीहरू मतलब नेपालीहरू गधा नै हुन् अब काम मात्रै गर्न जान्छन् तिनीहरू गधा जस्तो के किन चाहिन्छ एसी फ्रिज किन चाहिन्छ यिनीहरूलाई कहाँ नेपालमा पाउँछ अनि स्यालेरी पनि टाइममा आउँथेन अब टाइममा पनि अब काम त गराउँथ्यो काम गर्नेलाई अब त्यो कम्पनीको इच्छा अनुसारको हैन अब टाइम जति गरेको छ त्यति पाउँथेन मतलब दिन्थ्यो तर काटेर दिन्थ्यो कसैले केही गरिदियो कसैले के त्यहाँ अधिकांश साथीहरूको आइडी कार्ड थिएन 160-65 जना थियो त्यसमध्ये मलाई लाग्छ 20-25 जनाको मात्रै थियो भ्यालुएबल आइडेन्टिटी कार्ड त्यो थिएन त्यो नभएको खण्डमा हामी क्याम्पबाट कहीँ साथीलाई भेट्न जानु पर्दाखेरि पुलिसले भेटाएपछि समाएर लान्थ्यो अब समातेर लगेपछि कि त कम्पनी आउनु पर्यो छुटाउनलाई भिसा एप्लाई गरेर अब के कसरी हुन्थ्यो उनीहरूले मिलाएर ल्याउँथ्यो तर हाम्रो कम्पनीले के गर्थ्यो ल्याइदिन्थेन मान्छे मेनली हडताल गरेको कारण त्यही भने मैले 10 जना साथीहरू हैन अब जसलाई अब अर्को महिना पठाइदिन्छु भन्दा पनि 3 महिनासम्म मतलब बिना स्यालेरीमा पठाइदिएन उसको एग्रिमेन्ट पनि पुरा भइसकेको थियो र पनि पठाइदिएन त्यो साथीहरूले त्यसपछि सबैजनामा एउटा सहमति गर्यो कि अब के गर्ने सबैको आखिर त्यस्तै सिस्टम रहेछ जसले पनि त्यस्तै गर्थ्यो आखिर मैले पनि 2 वर्षमा भ्याकेसन दिने भनेको थियो दिएन टाइममा दिन्थेन केयरलेस गरिदिन्थ्यो अनि स्यालेरी पनि नदिने तिनीहरूलाई फेरि सुताएर अनि कसरी खास के गरी बाँच्छ त नि अब उनीहरूको नजरमा म त्यति बेला त्यो सबै मान्छेले बिगार्ने लिडर जस्तो भइसकेको थिएँ हैन त्यही भएर त्यति बेलाको मतलब सिचुएसन एकदमै गम्भीर थियो त्यति बेला कस्तो स्थिति आइसकेको थियो भन्दाखेरि मतलब कतै पनि केही नभए मतलब कहाँ फसेको छु जस्तो लाग्थ्यो कि त्यही भएर मैले भनेको थिएँ एउटा हिन्दी फिल्मको त्यो डायलग भनौँ न जिन्दगी की तलाश में हम मौत की मुँह में आ गए भनेर भनेको थिएँ मैले हैन
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Now, Mr. Rania, this is a very unfortunate story, and this is one story of many stories, and not only in Qatar. This is a story of many workers, not only migrant workers in general, laborers around the world. Now, speaking of Qatar, since we were talking with Dr. Hussein before, we were saying that the international community is not doing enough. Now, what do you mean by doing enough, and what do you mean by in an international community?
Yeah, actually, let's start by identifying or defining the international community. Do we mean that they are the international human rights NGOs or labor confederations around the world? Actually, they are trying to do a lot. They are trying to do what they actually do. They name and shame, they talk about the violations, they try to uncover stories and try to do some sort of advocacy and pushing towards the government to be able to change. And everything you've shown until now, or the 2 reports that you've shown until now, are actually things that were produced by either Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, The Guardian, things that we also, as Business and Human Rights Resource Center, cover, things that the International Trade Union Federation or Confederation also work. I've heard Dr. Hussein saying that maybe we need to push Qatar so that we can rerun the vote. Actually, the ITUC had the campaign of rerun the vote for Qatar since like a year now. So there has been some sort of work from the international human rights organizations and labor unions and so on. I don't know how much actually the governments are doing per se pressuring Qatar, and I would like to highlight more not only the game of the states but also the companies, how much people are actually working and pressuring the companies to observe their duties to respect and protect human rights. And this is something very important. Every time many of these international human rights organizations try to shed lights on the concerns and the poor practices and the violations that are on the way, we receive threats of libel, we receive threats of filing legal suits against us because we are defaming the companies, we are making their business look bad, so we publish defamatory information.
This is one of the main issues. Like whenever there is a human right violation, like you always automatically blame the state and you always go to attack the state. But what about the companies? What about the corporation, the corporate system that is actually doing these violations? 100%.
And this is why we actually, and as I said earlier on, we want to focus as well on the corporations, because these have the duty to actually respect and observe human rights standards. I'm not saying, and this is why the three framework, or the three-pillar framework, is actually complementary. So we cannot just say that the duty of the country or of the state to protect, but actually we need also the companies to respect, and the access to justice, which is one of the major issues. And this is a complementary mode, if we say.
Okay, now since we were talking about the game of states, and I'm going to go back now to Dr. Hussein Gharbieh. Dr. Hussein, I'm really glad that we have you tonight as a political science professor. Now, do you think politically there is a certain, do you think there is a political aspect, political gain from this pressure on Qatar?
Well, the thing I have to comment on the issue of companies. Let's not be naive. These companies work in a state where you have authorities there. If these companies broke the rules of working conditions and given the rights to these workers, the authorities should move in and settle the issue. The misery of these workers has been going on for at least a couple of years now.
Yeah, Dr. Hussein, I would just, excuse me, I would just like to clarify that we were, of course, the state is responsible, but we need to focus also on the responsibility of the companies. That is the point that I wanted to highlight on.
Yeah, this is the, if you let me finish, I mean, this is the issue. These companies are not working parallel to the states. They are in the states, and they should be liable to the states as well, the regulation of workers. So if they break the rules, these workers should be able to go to the authorities in order to claim their rights. So they cannot even move. Let's be clear about that. These companies who actually contracted or subcontractors to undertake the responsibility of constructions, basically the top people of these companies belong to the Qatari people, and they are very influential ones as well. So that's why the issue hasn't been settled. That's why the issue is still going on in favor of these companies. And
but Doctor, you have multinational companies as well who are involved in multiple violations.
These multinational companies, the issue, as I said, it goes down to the authorities. The authorities should deal with the issue. I blamed in the beginning of my talks the authorities are of the countries where these people belong to. They should move, and they should exert pressure on the Qatari government. They should even break diplomatic relationship.
And that's exactly what they did recently, Doctor. I mean, the Indian embassy and the Nepalese embassy presented numbers of people, 500 Indian people, according to the embassy, but with no explanation of how they died. They just represented these numbers.
And so what? What's the result? I mean, I want to see results on these communications. I don't want to say, okay, let's present the issue and we stop. No, we should take an action. What kind of action has been taken by these governments? Nothing at all.
When you say action, do you mean taking this case to the UN eventually?
If so, why not? This is their citizens. They should look after their citizens. But as I said in the beginning, these countries they have corrupt governments, and they don't care about about their citizens. So they want to cover up and not to appear to their own public that they don't care about their people. So they keep issue downplayed in order not to go to the surface, to expose them as how their citizens have been treated abroad. So there's some kind of subtle agreement between these countries and the authorities of Qatar and the companies who run the constructions.
But Dr. Hussein, going back to the main question that I wanted to get your experience from, since we have you tonight, do you think there is any political aspect to this pressure now on Qatar?
Well, and the way I see it, there isn't at all. There isn't at all. What the authorities of Qatar cares about is to get the business and the construction done at the expense of these people, whether they get their rights or not. They want the things to be done. They left the issue entirely in the hands of these companies, where the company is doing a very good job, in fact, of depriving these workers from their own rights.
Okay. Now, Ms. Rania, let's talk about like a couple of things me and Dr. Hussein talked about. Talking about the companies and Qatari companies or even multinational companies which are involved in these human rights violations. I mean, as the doctor said, like if the government, if the state itself, and we're going here to justice. If me as a migrant worker, I want justice, I'm going to seek justice through the laws of the state. The laws of the state, or the state is corrupt. The laws are not by my side. What do I do?
Actually, as my background, I come from a human rights organization. What we do actually is that we uncover issues and we advocate. And the whole stories start, and as I said before, from the non-state actors, from the non-governmental organizations, from the media, so from The Guardian and so on. So these were actually who were stirring the pot, and not any government was stirring the pot against what's happening in Qatar. So what we are trying to do is what we can actually do. I mean, we are not governments, we cannot put laws, we cannot, we can advocate, we can name and shame, we can act against companies, we can ask companies to abide, but we don't have law enforcement powers. We are not judges, we are not state apparatus, we're not police. So what we can do is that actually we are trying to do. But to tell you the truth, yes, this is a big challenge when you talk about inability to access justice. And as I said earlier, the migrant workers are unable to go to the courts, they are unable to file their suits, they are unable to claim their rights, and this is one of the major impediments. One of the major things
is that it's a fact that only Qatari workers are allowed to form or even join any trade unions.
Exactly, this is one of the major issues as well. Collective bargaining, right to association, meaning to be able to join labor unions, to be able to bargain collectively as a group with the companies. These are all inexistent, not only in Qatar. I don't want to be... it's inexistent in most of the Gulf or all the Gulf region, and also in big parts of the Arab world. Labor rights and labor union rights are under scrutiny a lot in this part of the world. And this makes them under attack in several ways. I mean, in Lebanon, we've seen this Pinus case. In Egypt, we see the cases all the time, especially with the waving and spinning labor union, or those who work in steel. This is in Iraq, all the oil labor market or oil sector labor syndicates and unions have been as well a lot manipulated. So this problem is widespread in the region, and yes, we face a lot of, poor laws to protect labor rights.
Now, this was regarding international organizations. How about, do you think this is the time now where activists from the country shouldn't rely on multinational or international organizations and start certain NGOs, certain initiatives from the country itself to protect their country's rights? I mean, to protect the country's image.
Actually, this is what we want. But the main thing is that the general mood is that the state has to protect human rights. We say yes, it's the primary duty holder to protect human rights is the state. However, companies have obligation, and this is what I want to actually emphasize, because if also syndicates, people, human rights organizations, all actors, all activists work also to uncover what the companies are doing. And please allow me to tell you an example in Egypt. Vodafone, during the first 2011 Tahrir Square movement, when the first time the Egyptians were actually rallying against the former president, Mr. Mubarak, what happened is actually Vodafone has cut internet down, and then the activists and a lot of people in Egypt has acted against Vodafone for the next 3-4 months, Some of them stopped subscriptions, some of them changed, I mean, they went to other providers and so on. So they kind of collectively punished Vodafone.
So there was pressure.
There was pressure, exactly, on Vodafone. And what we are seeing now, for example, in also another example from Palestine or the occupied Palestinian territories, when we have a lot of the companies that are working, Israeli companies or companies that are working in Palestine, are abusing a lot of human rights. Recently, last year, we know that the EU or certain countries of the EU has also banned selling and buying products from these specific countries who work in the settlements and who are very abusive. Everyone heard of G4S also in Palestine. I mean, there are real cases, but actually we need to put a lot of pressure because there are weak laws, and because the states are not actually doing their jobs. But with a lot of pressure, things might get actually better.
Okay, now allow me now to stop here because we are going to take a short break, and after the break we go to our last segment, which is certain bullet points we need to showcase and also take the comments of our guests. Stay tuned.
Around the world, outside the mainstream, anywhere, everywhere. A media of your land, of your creation. A new media in a new era. Will it take the lead in the future? I believe so. This is Underground.
Underground, when vague turns to clarity.
Pollution and climate change. Medicine manipulation. Genetically modified food, the destruction of wildlife, and corporate exploitation. These are all part of the new terrorism threatening our future.
Eco-terrorism, global awakening to a world under threat.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Now we are going to get right to this with the bullet points that we have. Now the first bullet point is the following. Now the Amnesty warned in a damning report that workers were enduring 12-hour days in sweltering conditions and living in squalid, overcrowded accommodation. Now I just want to get a quick comment on this point. I mean, this is one of the basic rights of any worker, any laborer, the accommodation, the work, the conditions that you're living in, and these conditions weren't provided. This is according to Amnesty International. Now, shouldn't this information alone, and from an organization like the Amnesty International, which is credible around the world, shouldn't this information alone stir public opinion around the world and pressure governments?
Actually, we hope so, but it's not until now. I don't want to actually repeat what I said, but the international human rights organizations are trying to stir up things, but the results are not 100% as they wanted. But with mounting pressure, I think we can get there.
Okay, Dr. Hassan, do you believe that more pressure that is being applied right now on Qatar, and with mounting pressure, as my guest in the studio is suggesting, would actually lead to more results in this case?
Frankly speaking, my own opinion, no, it's not going to do anything, particularly if the duty is left to the international community represented by the Amnesty International. The effect would come directly from, as I said, the governments, the authorities of the governments where these people, workers belong to. Their governments should act quickly and strongly and effectively in order to force the Qatari government to take an action to ease the living situation and to give their own rights to the workers. This is the only way, in my opinion, that we'll get somewhere. If we don't do if the authorities of the government of the workers don't act swiftly and effectively, their living conditions and their life will be in fact threatened, and we will get nowhere at all. So this is the only way we can force the Qatari government to improve their treatment to these people.
All right, now let's move on to the second point, which is the International Trade Union Confederation has warned that up to 4,000 workers may die before a ball is kicked in 2022 without meaningful reform of the kafala system. Now, I don't want to get into the details of kafala system, but a lot of people describe kafala system as modern slavery. Do you personally agree with this term, with this description of the kafala system?
Actually, let's first talk about what is the kafala system.
Let's give a quick...
What is the sponsorship system? So when the sponsorship system, actually work sponsorship is a system that is applied in all the world, even in Western countries. But what is not applied in all the world is the slavery actions like confiscating passports, poor living conditions, poor working conditions, long period of work, and all this. But I mean, to have a sponsor in a country abroad when you are going to work, this basic thing is there in all over the world.
Yeah.
This is number one. But the other conditions are actually the violating conditions. So let's talk about the violating conditions of the sponsorship system, and not like attacking the sponsorship system per se, because it's there all over the world.
What are the critical points in this system?
As I said, it's the fact that that they are not on the contract. It doesn't put them on equal grounds. So that the worker doesn't actually have access to his passport, doesn't have access to negotiate the agreements, to go out of the country, to stop working, and so on. These are basic issues. And the mere fact that this sort of impediments and what we call tying the worker to the employer is the big problem. But and these actually should be focused on, and not like the kafala system as a whole, or the sponsorship system as a whole. So there are the certain things inside.
Okay, Dr. Hussein, do you think there has to be a social reform within Qatar, not just only the government, because we know the government has to do a lot of things, but it's not doing. But do you think there is a form of social reform, a social awareness that could be done in Qatar, for example, and that could change people's mentalities, or that could even make the sponsorship system or the kafala system better in a more humanitarian way?
The thing is, there are 2 points here. The social attitudes of the national people of these Arab Gulf states towards the foreigners and the kafala system. Socially, the native people of these countries look at these workers from poor states coming to take their money. This is a fact here. And they treat them with disrespect. Now, with the kafala system, on the other hand, it is in fact it should put pressure on the employer in order to provide the conditions of the working agreement between the two parties, the workers and the employers. Despite the fact there are some negative aspects of the kafala system, it has some positive points where it puts pressures on the employer. But the problem is this pressure is not seen, it's not being implemented, and it's been left to in the hand of the employer to do whatever they please to control the workers.
But one of the major points, Doctor, is that under this sponsorship system, workers cannot leave the country without the consent of the sponsor. Workers sometimes the contracts are manipulated, and the employees are working in a different condition than the initial or the first contract they had in front. Who should monitor this?
Yes, of course. I mean, the authorities, not the employers who invented the kafala system. It is in fact the authorities. So when the authorities created such kind of contracts between the employer and the employees, it stopped at that point. It should go further in order to force the employer to fulfill the rest of the agreements, that is to provide the workers with proper living conditions and to pay them what they have to get paid. So the government forced the kafala system on one hand and didn't see it to go further in order to be implemented in a human way. So this is the main problem. It's to enforce a proper usage of the kafala system to benefit both sides, the employer and the worker themselves.
Okay, now allow me now to go to the third point, which is Qatar has been named among 11 countries to be downgraded to extreme risk for working conditions, according to a new global index by Maplecroft. Now, do you think that this could have a certain effect, and like this could be significant move in pressuring, for example, in this case, the Qatari authorities?
Actually, for me, the moment that Qatar won the FIFA 2022, they entered into the international scrutiny. Not knowing it maybe, but they actually did. So since they won it, they are under scrutiny of everyone, including Maplecroft, including everyone, and including everyone in terms of indexes. So not only about this, but also human trafficking issues in Qatar are on the rise. And what I want actually to link is, or to highlight, and for me, migrant workers, the process of bringing them into the Qatar or into any other country is also a process of trafficking and abuses. These people actually pay a lot of money to be able to come to Qatar. They sometimes sell their houses, they sometimes take loans and credit so that they can come to Qatar, and they have the dream of actually working and getting better living conditions. So everything with respect to the recruitment of these migrant workers in homeland is also very problematic. And here also, and I agree with Dr. Hussein that there is a lot of responsibility on the sending countries as well as on the receiving countries, because the recruitment process is a problematic process, and it takes place inside the sending countries. And unfortunately, the sending countries are not doing anything, and the receiving countries are actually abusing
and using this as an
100%. So this is getting is making the situation worse. But we need to highlight that also in sending countries there are a lot of problems.
Okay, now allow me now to move to the last bullet point here, which is Qatar pledged to uphold international labor laws when it won hosting rights to the 2022 World Cup, and it must keep this promise by abolishing its restrictive sponsorship system. Dr. Hussein, do you think Qatar in the near future maybe would head into applying into actually implementing its promises to the international world when it actually took this right and of organizing the World Cup, the 2022 World Cup?
Well, we hope so. This is what we really want to see in the Gulf states. But as I said in the beginning of your program, that it is social thinking, not only in Qatar but in the all Arab Gulf states, that the way they look at the people or the migrant people coming from these poor countries from Asia. So it's more complicated, and I don't think Qatar will represent a sort of a new democratic rules towards the foreign workers than the rest of the Gulf states.
But
so I don't see it happening, to be honest.
But don't you think its opportunity of hosting this is on the stake? Don't you think it's now threatened by the international community?
This is in fact what's really sad in the issue. The international community, particularly those, the modern world or the Western world, in fact, they see what's happening in Qatar, but they do not lift a finger, and they do not pressurize the Qatari government in order to stop this inhuman action towards these migrant workers. And this raises so many questions, even regarding these Western governments. I don't know exactly where these people have to turn to, but their own governments.
Okay, Ms. Rania, this is the just within, like, if you can, less than 1 minute, can you what do you think is expected now from Qatar? and from the international organizations?
I would like to say two actually things. The first is
quickly, please,
that EU FIFA had a hearing on the 14th of February where they put Qatar on scrutiny, and Qatar actually had some suggestions in order to amend their laws or their system, their working conditions and system. And we're yet to see what are these actual suggestions by Qatar. On the international scene, I would like to tell you that the Sochi Games that ended yesterday were under severe international scrutiny, and they had a lot of human rights abuses. Well, did it stop?
No.
Actually not. I can't say more than that.
So it will continue.
Yeah.
Okay. Ms. Rania Fazah, thank you very much for being with us. And Dr. Hussein Gharbieh, thank you also for being with us, ladies and gentlemen. This was the connection or the link we tried to find between business and human rights, and also we focused on the situation of migrant workers and laborers in Qatar. Stay tuned for next week for a different case and different humanitarian case. Thank you. See you next week.